Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's City Council meeting and Committee of the Whole meeting. It's my pleasure to announce that the City Council meeting is called to order. I kindly ask our recording secretary, Mr. McCready, to please take the roll call.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno here.
Alderman Burgart.
Here.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby here.
Alderman Caven.
Here.
Alderman Kilberg.
Here.
Alderman Kosrog.
Here.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra here.
Alderman Marks.
Here.
Alderman McGowan.
Here.
Alderman Swanson.
Here.
And Mayor Burns.
Here. Folks, if no one objects, I'd like to add something to the agenda. There's no action being requested on this matter tonight, but I do have a very special guest with us this evening. Her name is Zoe Criner. Zoe is with us tonight to share with all of us and those tuning in an important program that she has helped develop, create. You are stewarding, and you are helping an extraordinary amount of people. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to the podium. Zoe, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
And we've got handouts too, don't we?
We have handouts, lots
Very
of
exciting.
handouts. So if you want to go ahead and get started, this is Sandy Jensen. She is the grandmother of 2 Marines, one who's about to get shipped out again.
Wow.
I myself am the mother of 7 children. I have a son who's on active duty, currently assigned to NATO, and a daughter who's a first responder.
Huh.
So thank you again for having me here. I'm afraid that the topic that I'm going to speak on tonight might not sit very well with some of you, and that's okay, because it's one that not too many people are comfortable with, but it's one that desperately needs to be talked about. Let me take you back to March 17th, 2017. While most of St. Charles was at the middle school for the St. Baldrick's event, there was what seemed like an invasion of sirens. They were coming from everywhere. Just 7 blocks from where we were, a man in a bitter custody battle killed his 2 daughters, Brittany and Tiffany, and then himself, just 4 days shy of their 16th birthday. Many responding officers had teens the same age, and a friend of mine was one of the first on the scenes. And he has said to me time and time again, Zoe, it's just something you cannot unsee. Many responders from that night, first responders from that night, are still seeking help for PTSD. Growing up, my son Stephen, who's assigned to NATO, had a best friend, Patrick. They were like 2 peas in a pod. Patrick went straight into the Marines after high school, and 11 months ago, after being home for 2 months after getting out of the Marine Corps, Patrick lost his battle with PTSD. Everyone said we didn't have a clue. My daughter, who's a first responder, fast forwarding to this summer on July 22nd, the first responder family was saddened to hear of a 27-year-old firefighter from Hinsdale who took her life as well. Same story. No one had a clue. Everybody has heard of 22 a day. You see the official social media challenges, 22 push-ups to bring awareness to PTSD. But how many of you could actually name symptoms of PTSD? Not many. I usually get flashbacks and nightmares, and most people can't even tell you that there's a difference between the two. What about poor judgment, lack of feelings, insomnia, isolation, self-destruction, anger that rages, hypervigilance, and worst of all, survivor's guilt. During World War I, it was called shell shock. In World War II, they called it combat stress reaction or combat stress fatigue. Now, over 100 years later, we're calling it PTSD, but we're not much closer to getting help for those who suffer with it. That is why I founded a nonprofit called Support Over Stigma. Our first goal is to work with active duty veterans, first responders, or active duty military, veterans, first responders, and their family who are battling post-traumatic stress disorder. We do this by removing the stigma from seeking help. We offer the resources and tools needed to get them started down the road of recovery, and by educating the public to the struggles that someone with PTSD goes through on a daily basis. PTSD does not just affect the person who has it. It affects everyone in their sphere of influence. We all hear the phrase 22 a day about veteran suicide. That's what everybody talks about. Nobody talks about active duty suicides. Since the first of this year, in an article that was released on September 29th, stated National Guard active duty suicides are up 10%. My heart dropped. Air Force active duty suicides up 20%. Active duty U.S. Army suicides are up 30%. The Marines and the Navy numbers are so high, they won't even release them or talk about them. Not a day goes by where you don't read on one of these parents of military pages that there was another suicide at Fort Bragg or Camp Lejeune or wherever. It just breaks your heart as a mom. They cite the reasons as quarantine, isolation, depression, the extended deployments because of travel and COVID restrictions. We at Support Over Stigma have decided that we cannot sit by and idly watch this happen. About this time last year, I got a call from my son who said, I've got a buddy, he never gets any mail, he came right into the Air Force out of the foster care system. There's literally no one to write this kid. Can you just drop him a note? Well, being a mom, I sent my kid a box and I sent the kid a box. And he called me once the boxes got there and he said, Mom, there is a 275-pound, 6'4" man sitting on his bed sobbing like a little boy because somebody thought to send him a package. We've created a really, really big goal this year. Our goal is to send 1,000 boxes to deployed troops, especially in the bases where there's higher numbers of suicides. 1,300 stockings for veterans in VA homes and nursing homes, and even some secret Santa stops to first responders because PTSD is on the rise there as well at Christmas time. If you'd like to learn more about our organization, you can find us at www.supportoverstigma.org or on Facebook and Instagram. With a mission this big, we have to count on the generosity of our friends and neighbors. On our website, there is a list of items needed. There's a spot where you can shop and sponsor an individual box, so that box would go to a military service member specifically from you and your family. There's even a button where you can click donate to help cover, because obviously 1,000 boxes at $20 a piece is an awful lot of shipping cost. We even have an Amazon wish list, so those of you who are COVID self-distancing can shop from a wish list. It gets shipped directly to me, no fuss, no muss. And we really appreciate you giving us a chance to listen. Or to listen to us tonight. The two things that you were handed, one is a postcard. It tells a little bit about us. My name is Zoe. The email on there comes to me. Second is this little package. And it might sound a little goofy, but I've handed these to grown men and women and watched them cry. We tell them the card is so you know how to get to us. The flag is to remind you what you fought for, and the soldier is to remind you that you always, always have a battle buddy, and if you can't find one, call us and we will find one for you. I just want to end with one thought, and then if anybody has any questions, this is actually on the bottom of all of my emails. If suicide ever crosses your mind, remember that I would rather hear you tell me your story than listen to it from someone else at your funeral. Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Zoe, thank you very much. I should share with the council that you and I reconnected about, 6 weeks or so ago. You were telling me about this extraordinary organization that you had created. And I said, why don't you come talk about it? And I'm delighted that you did. And to your point, it's not an easy subject to discuss or to recognize or to even try to understand, obviously. But you're doing incredible work.
Thank you.
And I know that those of us who know men and women in the service industries and those of us who know active duty service men and women know that you're doing extraordinary work.
Thank you.
So I'm very grateful to you.
And
And of course, Sandy,
Yeah, and the
wish
email.
the two Marines our very best.
Pardon?
Wish the two Marines in your life our very best.
Thank you.
Wow.
And the email on there, if you know anybody who is deployed who has an APO or an FPO address, send us an email. We will make sure they get a box. And the
that's sweet.
boxes will keep going as long as the funding keeps going. I talked to Don McHugh Chevrolet today. They are going to partner with us.
Oh, good.
I talked to Hawk Auto Group, and they actually are going to have their different offices compete against each other. And the Coldwell Banker down by the little, I always want to call it Scoobies, but it's the little, just, yes, Munchie Peas. They are also going to be a drop-off point for us. So, unless anybody else has any other questions?
Yeah, any comments or question for Zoe? Oh, we have Alderman Bruno, then Alderman Ruby.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Zoe. I was wondering, unless I missed it, is there, where would people go if they wish to contribute to this program?
Certainly, if you're looking to do monetary donations or order things online, you can go through our website, which is www.supportoverstigma.org. There is, when you scroll, there's one on the events page where it says ongoing, and it'll actually click you and take you straight to an Amazon wish list. Or one of those places that I just mentioned, the Coldwell Banker or the Don McHugh Chevrolet for sure. And actually, our warehouse where we're going to be packing all these boxes is actually right here in Geneva. It's at 2000 Gary Lane. So
Oh, nice.
Tech Pro is who's partnering with us, and they give us the space for October and November to be able to
Fantastic.
sort our stuff and pack our boxes.
Great, thank you. When I went to your website as you were speaking, one of the links for donations didn't seem to work, but I saw up at the top right, there's a
Top right
donate
corner.
button.
Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And there was somebody else?
Yes, Alderman Ruby.
Thank you. I missed the .org on the
Oh.
website, so I got that now. But also, Zoe, I just wanted to say thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. Brought tears to my eyes just thinking about it. I love what you're doing, and I thank you very much for everything you're doing, and I wish you and your organization great success.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone from the dais here in the room? Yes, Alderman McGowan, and then,
Yeah, this is awesome what you're doing, and I thank you for being here as well. I think I actually saw something about the support over stigma boxes that you're doing and the stockings and everything on Facebook. It came through like a Geneva Facebook, so hopefully a lot of people have heard about it, and you'll get a good amount of support from the community. Also, what is a good like national number to call? I know that there are like 800 numbers for anyone who's having like who's feeling really low or thinking about like so
Yeah,
like
there's
1-800.
There's a lot of different numbers out there. Military and first responders tend to be a different nature. And I mean no disrespect by that. I have a girl who is stationed at a forward operating base. Her roommate committed suicide, and she calls me 3 times a week in the middle of the night because she just needs to know that somebody's there. But there is like the national hotline for suicide and all of those things, but if you actually go to our webpage, across the top, there's one that says resources, and we actually have quite a few different resources. Some of the few, we vet them very, very carefully before we put them on there. And people have heard of Take a Vet Fishing or Take a Vet Hunting, but they haven't necessarily heard of Operation Surf, which uses surfing to help work through PTSD, or there's a Warrior's Journey Home, which you literally start around a campfire and you end in a wigwam, and they use very Native American approach to PTSD. They've argued for years, is it a physical affliction? Is it a psychological infliction? In most cases, where there seems to be the most success is those who believe it's a moral infliction. It's you've done something that's in direct opposite of what you believe in, and you have to somehow mend that moral code, so to speak. And so on that page right there, there's a lot of resources.
That's awesome to know. That's great that all that is included. I guess for anyone like listening right now, I think like one number you could call is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. So thank you so much for all of this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alderman Kosrog, I believe you had your hand up, is it?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for coming too. My family's actually had somebody, it wasn't necessarily PTSD, but did take his own life in our family while he was in the armed services, so this is pretty close to home. I just want to say thank you for being here, and I'll definitely share this with my family and ask them to share it along from there too. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. And I know schools go in and out and do all those things that we're doing right now, but if there are any teachers listening, scout leaders listening, one of the things that we tried to do is get a handwritten letter, whether it's from a child or an adult, in every single box. One of the coolest thank you notes we got from our Christmas and July boxes that we sent out was, it was signed Justine, and his little sister's name is Justine, but he knows it wasn't from her, but just how cool it was that it was her name. It was just kind of one of those God moments, you know, it was really cool. So we're happy to help it and do those as well. And we had our Fill the Truck event this weekend at Faith Lutheran and collected almost 700 pounds of stuff.
Unbelievable.
So we keep keeping on because it takes a lot to fill those boxes. Each box weighs approximately 20 pounds. So
Is that right? Wow.
So anybody behind me have any questions? Okay.
Anyone else on the dais? We promised you you'd have the remainder of your evening free, right, Zoe?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy your night.
Thank you. Be safe.
Thank you.
Zoe, what happened to the foot?
I had a stroke a year ago, June.
What the heck? You're kidding me.
It's that's left.
Seriously?
It's been a while since you've seen me.
I know it has. Well, you look good. I'm glad you're well.
First I had to beat the cancer, and now I got to beat the stroke, but it's okay if this is all I have left.
Yeah, you're extraordinary.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Enjoy your night.
Thank you. See you, Sandy.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Item 3, ladies and gentlemen, new business or public comment. Is there anyone with us this evening who has any new business or public comment they'd like to share with the council? Mr. Simon?
If I can quickly say, I did ask Mr. Simon to come here
course.
tonight. We've been talking with Alderman Bruto, city staff, for a while now about the issue he's going to talk to us about. We've kind of reached a standstill in terms of what city staff felt comfortable doing without further direction from council, so that's why Mr. Simon's here tonight. So
Excellent.
thanks for coming.
Mike Simon, 614 Easton Avenue in Geneva. I own the building at 220 South 3rd Street. It's commercial on the main floor and lower level and has 3 apartments and an office on the upper level. Since the building was built, or at least the new part, 34 years ago, all of the apartment residents have been given city downtown parking stickers so that they could park on the side streets adjacent to their resident. And it wasn't until this past May that it was brought up that the downtown parking sticker district starts at 4th Street, not 3rd Street, and works to 7th Street. So what we've been doing for the past 34 years apparently has not been legal. All of our tenants, without exception, have been given these stickers by the police department, and they've been parking, most of them work during the day, so they park at night and move when they're working. But since this, my building is not in the downtown district, they cannot now legally get downtown parking stickers. Because of that, I can't rent the apartments because I can't guarantee people that they're going to have a place adjacent to their home to park. So what I'm asking is for you folks to find a way to just formalize what's been the status quo for the past 34 years.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, Alderman Burkhart or Alderman Bruno? I know you've been corresponding with and speaking with Mr. Simon.
No,
I could,
oh, go ahead, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
yeah, we've been, I think we've all been looking at density downtown and downtown residential options. We certainly want to make downtown living viable. Understand the complexities of when we want to be consistent. So I think it's pretty important that we at some point have a discussion as to how we can support that downtown density and that upstairs residential. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Simon falls in an odd place that where his rentals, which are small scale rentals, 3 units, kind of predate a lot of our downtown parking restrictions. It seemed like it kind of maybe, it fell in a hole to where it was okay for his people to park there. He's been pretty patient. We've talked about with city staff a more comprehensive downtown parking discussion, which I'm glad to have, but I don't know that we want to have that anytime soon because we're in the midst of a pandemic that's totally changing our traffic and parking patterns downtown. I think Mr. Simon needs some relief now because he has rental units. We are in the suburbs. People do expect parking. This isn't the city where will park 6 blocks away. And I'd like to see something that's not just 6 months or just a year because a lot of his renters are probably going to be longer term renters. It falls in this kind of weird gray area. So I'm eager to hear what other council members have to think and if they have any questions. So, thanks.
Anyone remotely, other than Alderman Bruno, have any comments or questions regarding this issue? Alderman Kilberg, I believe, is signaling he's ready to go.
Since these apartments have been rented and preceded some of the changes, I would concur with Alderman Burkhart that we ought to explore some manner in which we might be able to accommodate. And I don't know what that process would necessarily be, but I would certainly be inclined to support some measure to allow this off-street parking between 3rd and 4th.
Thank you, sir. Alderman Kasserag, then Alderman Swanson, then Alderman Caven.
I would agree with everybody who spoke before me here, and that I'm inclined to help Mr. Simon. I guess maybe Assistant City Administrator McCready, could you maybe tell us, me, I'm sorry, you guys all probably know, what is the resident parking program that's 4th through 7th Street? And how does that work, and why would 3rd Street be excluded?
So again,
Street apartments, of course.
it'd probably be most appropriate to have Chief Passarelli speak to this, who's not here this evening. Just looking here at City Code, there is a section there that has limited parking zones, and it's written in such a way that where there are limited time-restricted parking zones, that folks cannot just park there anytime. 3rd Street is restricted on the east and west sides between Franklin and South Street, to be exact. And again, not having a map here with me, it's kind of hard to visualize this and put it into play.
So I just would like to say I've known Mr. Simon for, well, pretty much ever since I've lived in Geneva. He's obviously multi-generation Geneva person. There's no way he's not been getting these parking passes for 34 years. And I would like to add too that I think part of the relief and part of the reason that I'd like to help Mr. Simon is that he has lowered his rents for some of his retail renters. And so he's just trying to help them survive and help himself survive all at the same time. And I think that's relevant that he's helping others in this equation as well. And I guess my ultimate question, I don't know that we're going to be able to answer that tonight, is what can we do to sort of expedite that process? I'm with Alderman Burghardt that I don't want this to necessarily be involved in a long-term discussion about parking patterns and things like that in the middle of the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Swanson,
Thank you, Mayor.
then Caven.
For the last couple years, we've had multiple conversations at this dais to increase the number of resident units in the downtown and talked specifically about units above stores. And here we have a case where we have units above stores and we're taking away something. So we're going against what we've been trying to do for the past several years. So I would completely support allowing a workaround to allow the apartments to still have parking. I would probably want a time limit on it, perhaps 2 years, if that would help the leasing, until we do the analysis that was going to be done with the downtown study. But for a temporary fix, I think we should include 3rd Street. And then the 2-year time frame, we could come back and say perhaps it should be extended and be from 3rd to 7th or not from 4th to 7th. So it wouldn't be a permanent, but allow Mr. Simon some, give him an ability to rent the units in the short term. So I would agree with Alderman Burghardt and think we should come up with a workaround quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Caven.
Thank you. Well, I guess I don't have to go into, excuse me. I guess I don't have to go into too much detail because I pretty much concur with what's been said to this point. If this has been happening for the last 34 years and it hasn't been a problem, I don't believe that there's a whole lot of apartments above a lot of those stores or being used that way currently. So I don't foresee there being a major problem. I'm happy to go through and look at that study at a later date as well to see if there's something more comprehensive we need to do, but I would be in support of providing some relief in this situation. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman McGowan.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
I am also in favor of allowing Mr. Simon's tenants to continue having parking permits. However, I feel that in order for Mr. Simon to lease these, I believe, are they currently vacant units?
Yeah.
In order for him to continue attracting the best tenants, I would like to see the city allow him to offer or to provide the parking stickers, the parking permits, for the duration of the lease or 2 years, whichever is longer. I'm sorry, there's weird feedback coming from my microphone. Hope you guys can hear me okay. Because if Mr. Simon finds the perfect tenant, or maybe several great tenants lined up, but they all wish to be long-term tenants, which is great for the stability of downtown and everything. If he has to say, hey, but by the way, after 2 years, you might not have parking ability, that's really going to be a deterrent, I feel. So I don't really feel like there should be a 2-year limitation. I believe it should be, he should offer them whatever the length of the lease is. And then, I don't even know if this is possible, but then go to the city and we will be willing to accept that. And from there, maybe, we'll have our conversation as a city, and then perhaps after those leases expire, maybe 10 years from now or whatever, you would have to revert to whatever the city has agreed for 3rd Street residential, if that makes sense. So, thank you.
Alderman Marks.
It sounds like we're all pretty much in agreement, so what's really the next steps then? Does the city, assistant city administrator know, or
Yeah,
mayor?
it's going to be my suggestion that we can't take action this
No, we
evening.
can't, I know that.
we have to be clear that our professional staff can only interpret the ordinance as written, therefore we have to amend the ordinance accordingly. In order to amend the ordinance accordingly, I'm going to rely on Mr. McCready to work with Chief Passarelli to structure some sort of recommended amendment that we can consider as early as, and the earliest we can, is October 19th. The reason being is next week we have a joint City Council and Strategic Plan Advisory Committee meeting. So the 19th is the earliest that could come back before us with recommended amendment language. Now, if this council concurs, we could have that at the, well, we could bring it straight to the council if you'd like, or we could go through the committee of the whole process. I'll defer to you.
Well, I think since there's so much agreement that makes
Seeing no
something,
objection,
let's
we'll come
just take
right
it
to the council.
Yeah, take it right to the council.
Mr. Sandak is present this evening remotely. Of course, he'll review the details along with Mr. Radovich in terms of the legal implications, as it were, but
And I would just, if I may just add, there's
Please.
other staff that'll need to be
Exactly.
involved in this. Again, this was slated for a future policy
Right.
discussion already, but.
economic development,
you know,
I'm certain community development, so,
Certainly for staff to take the input that's been here tonight and evaluated and
right, absolutely.
work forward with it.
And of course, this would not be an amendment to the ordinance that is exclusive simply to this property. It would be an exception to, quite frankly, redrafting the boundaries, my assumption, but.
Is there, thank you, Mr. Mayor, is there not a way to just, and I'm not saying we need to do this tonight or anything rushing it along, but to just give Mr. Simon, sort of grandfather him in without rewriting the entire code, without a discussion?
We're not allowed to do so tonight,
Of course not.
and we would not be allowed to do so without some sort of action being taken by the council. There has to be concurrence by this council.
I guess what I was asking is there, could we make a motion now or at a future meeting
No.
to just grandfather in Mr. Simon?
We can't make a motion this evening. That would be inappropriate since this item was not posted with 48 hours' notice. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I think more what Brad's saying is, what, I guess, you're saying basically we'll need to rewrite the boundaries, so you'll say the west side of Third Street from blank to blank are included in the downtown, or,
Well, that's
I
my-
know
that's-
it's kind of worded, it's kind of a reverse negative, the way it's worded in terms of time limits and stuff.
I'm going to defer to the professional staff, particularly Chief Passarelli,
Okay.
because I have a feeling that the, what's the best phrase? Not domino effect, but, I forgot the phrase.
Precedent, I mean,
I think if we change one block for one address, what's the impact to the others? If that impact is significant enough, should we then also change those others so that we do it in one fell swoop as opposed to piecemeal? And then we discover 2 months later, oh, hell, we should have probably done this as well. Passarelli is certainly most, or best versed, he and his team, with respect to those different restrictions. That's my thought. But
I know, Mr. Simon, we did, and the city staff did work with us, you got one, I
Right.
think you were gonna get one permit, he, you know, kind of, we were all going back and forth and maybe missed some details. Really, some units you feel like you need two, because you rent to a couple, right? And if
Well,
they have two
sometimes they
cars.
start out as a single person. I had one of the apartments that's for rent now started out with a single young lady, and then she got married, and then they had a family. So they stay for a long time. So where they start out might not be where they end up. So yes.
Okay, very good, thanks.
And I had one other question, forgive me. Is it my understanding that the request would allow for those with a permit to park virtually anywhere within those ramparts at any time?
Not on Third Street.
But
just
not
the
on
side
Third Street,
streets.
exactly, on the side streets, okay.
I started to belabor my point. I just don't want to get too caught up in a policy discussion at our next city council and on October 19th.
Yeah, we're
where
not going to.
We just want to help out Mr.
And
Simon.
we're gonna drive this to recommended amendment language, and we're gonna discuss it,
Okay,
and then if we, and decide it. And then if at a later date, we still wanna have that policy discussion, which I suspect we do, on a more holistic approach regarding parking coefficients, what have you, then we'll do that.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think Alderman Swanson recommended that the parking that Mr. Simon should receive should be somewhere on, was it East Side Drive? Just make sure, make a note.
With shuttle service.
Or Kirk, or Kirk. Yeah. Anyone else, questions? consensus is to move in that direction? Anyone object? Thank you, Mr. Simon.
Okay, a couple of things to add for your consideration. First, echoing what Alderman McGowan said, if you're thinking of doing something that's going to sunset in a couple of years, I'd prefer we don't do that. When people do sign up for an apartment, they tend to stay for a long time, and that's the kind of renters I'm looking for. I've got a 15-year renter, a 10-year renter. I've got somebody, believe it or not, who was one of my high school teachers, who's just,
I know.
yeah, who just loves being there.
It's the best apartment in town.
And then if you're thinking of expanding the boundaries to include 3rd Street, to the best of my knowledge, this is the only building on 3rd Street that does have upper-level apartments. So I don't think changing the boundary is going to have any kind of an impact other than, as I said at the beginning, continuing the status quo.
Sure.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you very much.
If I may, Mayor, just
Yes,
one
please
point I
do.
would add, without the input of staff tonight, I'd like the opportunity to review this with them, just so they have a
Oh,
chance for
absolutely.
input.
Absolutely.
Again, duly noted on the timeline we've discussed, but given the complexities of it, I would make sure we have a chance to see, for others, including some in the audience and others, to weigh in on that before.
Exactly. Kathleen, I know, David,
yeah.
exactly.
And it seems like one thing we're talking about, but I can tell you right now is we don't have a comprehensive list of others that may be affected,
Well,
up
and-
and down the area, so it'd be.
To Mr. McCready's point, because this would be a
When we're
public
doing this.
discussion, anyone and everyone who believes that perhaps they should also be considered will certainly have that right to do so, absolutely. So, yeah. I trust you walked here tonight, Mr. Simon?
Of course. Yeah, just don't watch me leave.
Yes, I won't. Thank you, Mike. Item 4A, folks, is a presentation by the Geneva, or excuse me, on the Geneva. Oh, forgive me. Yes.
Sorry, under number 3, new business, may I make a comment?
Oh, absolutely. Forgive
Okay.
me.
No, that's okay, thank you. I just wanted to mention that happy October. It's happy October. So this is something that was sent to me in my city inbox from the, I believe, Morton Arboretum.
Oh, yeah.
Just recognizing the importance of oak trees to our ecosystem. They help the environment. They absorb a crazy amount of water, stormwater runoff. They provide shade. They provide a habitat for like hundreds and hundreds of different species. And we have a lot of native oak trees in our city, which are beautiful. And so they do a lot for our community and for our health. So I just wanted to wish everyone, once again, happy
The lost pearl of the council.
October. Happy October. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Any new business? I see our financial team is ready to go. Item 4A, folks, a presentation on the Geneva Police and Firefighters Pensions Actuarial Report. Finance Director Cruz is with us this evening. She'll be introducing us to a guest as well. Traditionally speaking, you would prefer to complete the PowerPoint, or would you like questions throughout the PowerPoint?
PowerPoint's later on.
Oh,
That'll be the
okay.
last agenda item on the.
Excellent.
On the cow. So on an annual basis, for the past 4 years, we have had Foster & Foster do an actuarial evaluation for both our police and fire pension. So Jason Franken is here from Foster & Foster tonight to do a quick presentation about the current year results.
Mr. Franken, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. So, as Rita mentioned, I'm here to discuss the results of the actuarial evaluation as of May 1st, 2020. And we do this each year to determine the financial status of each of the pension plans, including things as the funded ratio, which is the ratio of your assets to your liabilities, and also the annual required contribution that's needed for each of the plans. So since I was here last year, we had a few different changes go into this year's valuations. One, based on discussions with you, with the staff, we've made a couple of different assumption changes. The assumptions that we use, specifically the ones that were changed in this case, were related to salary. We had been assuming that salaries would increase at 5% per year. We didn't think that was reasonable. We changed it to better reflect the annual increases that are being provided. Additionally, we changed the assumption that determines the steepness of your pension ramp. You've all heard of the Illinois pension ramp, and we had been using an assumption of 5% for that as well. And when you have a 5% increase in your annual assumption or annual contribution built in, it really leads to a backloaded contribution that's going to increase significantly over the next 20 years. So ultimately, we believe that we need to be in the 3 or 3.5% range for that assumption. And when we lower it, since our contributions in the future aren't going to be as large, it actually increases our current contribution. We didn't, by lowering it from 5 to 3, that would lead to an increase that probably isn't, feasible. So we did change it from 5% down to 4.5% this year, with the intentions of lowering it, a little bit each year until we get to the desired assumption. The last thing that changed was part of the consolidation bill. You probably all heard that all of the police plans in the state are going to be consolidated from an investment perspective into one fund. Same thing for the fire. So there's going to be 2 large pension plans that cover downstate police officers and firefighters, rather than 650 different plans. Part of that, so the consolidation is going to be happening within the next 24 months or so. So that, the benefit of that will come down the road as all the monies comes together and it's invested, and hopefully we earn a larger rate of return by having more money in these plans. The downside of it, at least from a contribution perspective, is that there were additional benefit improvements that were provided to Tier 2 people. So the Tier 2 benefits, they're significantly less than Tier 1. There's been some discussion that, the Tier 2 benefits would, the Social Security exemption would cause problems with that. And so as part of that consolidation bill, Tier 2 benefits were improved to eliminate that issue that would arise down the road. And so those benefit improvements were effective January 1st, 2020. So your contribution as a result of that between the 2 plans is about $170,000 higher than it would have been if those contribution improvements were not part of that bill. The good news, I guess, from your perspective is that at least this year the assumption changes actually lowered your contribution a little bit. So the combination of the two, the assumption changes and the benefit improvements, really, for the most part, offset each other. So we're left with the experience, and that's really driving the contribution this year. As you know, with the pandemic hitting early, in March, it's sort of the height, the stock market really, took a big hit. And as a result, with your April 30th, 2020 fiscal year end, you were not able to, receive all of the recovery. The recovery didn't hit your plan, prior to these valuations. And so the plans, both finished in the red for the year in terms of in terms of a return for, one of the plans, and I can't remember which one it was. The police plan had a return that was about -3% for the year, or 0.3%, sorry. So, not significantly negative, just about 1/3% negative. But the fire plan actually had a pretty big hit. The return for the year was almost -8%. So we do smooth that in over a 5-year period. So there will be some upward pressure in your contribution requirements going forward because of those returns, which are significantly less than the 7.25% assumption that we have been assuming. So I guess quickly, I'll just give you the highlights of the results. Your funded ratio for the police plan was 56.5% last year, and it actually went up a little bit this year to 57.3%. So there was a slight improvement in the funded ratio this year, and the contribution went up by about $78,000 from $1.63 million to just about $1.71 million. So the funded ratio did go up a little bit, and there was a $78,000 increase to the contribution for the year. In terms of the fire plan, the funded ratio did go up again, from 70.2 to 71.1, so almost a 1% improvement in the funded ratio. And the contribution only went up about about $32,000, from $766,000 to almost $799,000. So while the contributions didn't go up significantly this year, keep in mind that I said we had a negative year and we only recognized 20% of the loss we have. So I would expect that there will be upward pressure in those contribution requirements over the next 4 years as we start recognizing those investment losses that we had for the year. Obviously, anything can happen. If we get significantly more than our 7.25%, then it could offset some of those losses that we had and neutralize the contribution increase. The last thing about that 7.25%, it is a relatively, you are relatively high compared to most of your, neighbors at 7.25. Most are closer to 6.75. This assumption is it's at this point it's sort of a short-term assumption because it's based on how this plan is invested. We know in a couple years how this plan is invested is going to be completely different than how the consolidated plan is invested. So I'm not as concerned about that assumption being a little bit high right now, just because in two years 7.25% might be realistic depending on how the consolidated board decides to invest their assets, and they won't have the same restrictions that the current boards have. So while that assumption is a little bit high, it really is a short-term assumption, and we'll need to re-examine that once we have an investment policy from the consolidated fund. So once we have that, we'll be able to get a better idea of what the long-term expectation for the plan should be. So that was quick, but I know you have a lot of other things to get to, so I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have about the results or anything else related to your pension plans.
Questions or comments from Mr. Franken? Alderman Marks to start, and Alderman Swanson.
Just one question, the consolidated plan, is that going to change some of our assumptions? Is that law going to change some of our assumptions, or are the assumptions going to stay the same?
That's, it's to be determined,
Okay.
At this point, because we don't know exactly how the consolidated plan is going to operate, just because there's not a lot, there's a lot of things that were not addressed in the legislation. My hunch is that yes, the assumptions will be different going forward, especially that investment return assumption, because in your case, you're probably not going to get much benefit to an increase in the rate, because 7.25, that's where IMRF is right now, and I don't anticipate that the consolidated fund will have something higher than 7.25. I was at a presentation by the executive director of the fire plan last week, and he suggested that the rate might be between 6.5% or 7%, somewhere in that range. So you're not going to see a benefit since your rate is, like I said, on the high side. But there are some plans that are at 5% right now, and because of the restrictions that they face, some of the smaller plans. So moving from 10% in equities to 65% in equities could have a huge benefit in those communities, and really increase that assumption. But that's obviously just one assumption. I think all of the other assumptions will be reviewed by the actuary, whether it's an actuary that is hired by the city or an actuary that's hired by the consolidated fund. They will review all of the assumptions, and there could be some changes to what is used.
Anything else, sir? Alderman Swanson.
Thank you, Mayor. You're right. When we talked about the pension assumptions earlier in the year, we talked specifically about the 7.25, and I was concerned, I think you mentioned at that time, that we were on the high end, and that many corporate pensions were reducing that assumption. Because if you look at page 36 of both reports, it adds to the unfunded balance of the police fund about $6 million. And to the police fund, about $3.5 million. So we're looking at some very big numbers. That's if you go from 7.25 to 6.25,
Yes,
which
yep.
is nice to have that spelled out. And perhaps we would not be going into as drastic a change as that 1%.
Yep.
The one assumption that was changed, the 5 to the 4.5%, also increased our pension expense. But this would increase our pension expense in addition to that if we were to reduce that number.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And the number you're talking about on page 36 is, yeah, it does show some sensitivity for your pension liability to a change. And you're right, going from 7.25 down to 6.25, at least for the police plan, would add, roughly $6.4 million of unfunded liability.
And it's 3.5 for the fire.
Yep. Yep.
So I guess that's something to keep in mind, that we have a potential for additional expense if we don't achieve that 7.25 or revise that assumption in the future.
Yeah, and as I was stating, for the next couple of years, 7.25 might, it's probably overstating it with the restrictions. But after that, 7.25 might not be too far off based on where the consolidated funds ends up. Maybe they're at 7.25, maybe they're at 7, but it will be, the gap between the 7.25 and where we are now and where we should be will shrink, and the magnitude of the increase to the liability would be significantly reduced.
Okay, and I understand that. And for the fire department, fire pension, I think the change would be less significant because they have much more restrictive covenants on what they can invest in.
Well, the police and fire, they have the same restrictions. So
Well, the return has been significantly lower in the
yes,
fire.
so the restrictions are the same, but that doesn't mean the investment policies are the same.
And that's what I was talking about. The
Yes.
investment policies are different.
Yes,
And
yep.
more conservative on the fire side.
Yes.
So
yep.
they have a little more upside
Yes,
as we
yep.
go forward.
Yep.
So I guess when I saw in your commentary on page 19, you said we're going to continue to monitor what assumption we should use here. You were addressing what's happening with the consolidation of the investment.
Yeah.
That's when we would make this.
Like I said, we made we've gone down the path of making some of the adjustments to the payroll growth, but that's the one assumption that we haven't addressed. And like I said, frankly, it's definitely on the high end. I mean, I only have, maybe 2 or 3 plans that have your rate or higher, and we work with 120 plans in the state. So there's not a whole lot of plans that are at 7.25 or more at this point. So it is an assumption that, if the consolidation wasn't sort of on the horizon, it would be one that I would feel much more passionately about addressing. But at this point, we could lower it if we lowered it to 6.5, and then we could end up turning around in 2 years and moving it back to 7.25. So, I don't want to cause, significant budgeting issues because you don't know what your contribution is going to be when the future is a little bit unknown at this point.
Okay. I just wanted to point out that it appears that we have 3 stresses on future contributions, one being this high assumption on the return.
Yep.
The second being reducing that ramp further
Yep.
from 5 to 4.5. And the third being, I think we have the amortization for 5 years of the unrealized loss that we have this year if that doesn't turn around.
Yep.
So
Yep, you're
we're
exactly
looking at not so great news on 3 fronts for the next few years.
Yes, I think that those are fair comments.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Kilberg, then Alderman Caven.
With these developments in the consolidation, how does that affect our fire pension board?
Well, so the new
Is that going to be dissolved then, or is there still a role there?
No, there still is a role. So the consolidation, at least initially, is for the investments only. So each fund will need to maintain their local pension board to administer the plan. for purposes of like disability hearings and those types of things. So the local board, it will remain the local boards will remain intact, but they will no longer have the investment authority that they have now. But pretty much everything else that will still be, part of, will be their responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Alderman Caven.
Thank you. So Alderman Kilberg just asked was kind of going the direction of one of my questions. So once these two pensions are fully consolidated, we won't even need to make any of these assumptions any longer, right? I mean, they're basically going to send us something that says, hey, this is what you owe, right?
Well, that's the IMRF model, but that's not, based on the legislation, those same changes were not made to the Article 3 and 4 pension code, which covers the police and the fire plans.
And if I may interrupt Mr. Franken
go
for a
ahead.
moment, as all of you know, Metro West Council of Government has been a strong advocate for the consolidation of this, including language similar to IMRF.
But,
Sadly, if I may speak
Yeah,
candidly,
sorry.
it was a trade-off of votes.
yeah,
Enhance Tier 2, keep autonomy, not the IMRF, take it or leave it. Enough votes were passed, or, secured, and here's what we got.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, so one of the way you're funding this plan right now is based on 100% by 2040. The Illinois Pension Code says that you have to be 90% by 2040. So you're actually contributing more than what the Illinois Pension Code says you have to. The problem with the Illinois Pension Code is that the minimum that you have to pay is like the credit card minimum on your credit card, the minimum on your credit card statement. You have a $1,000 balance, you're paying 10% interest, so you have $100 of interest, and the credit card company says as long as you pay $25, you're fine. So you make your $25 payment, what happens? Well, the credit card company says you're okay, but your balance hasn't gone down, it's gone up, because there's $100 of interest and you only made a $25 payment. So now you owe $1,000 and $1,075. And then the next month, the same thing. That's how the Illinois Pension Code minimum is designed. It's designed to not cover the interest and create an unfunded liability that continues to balloon. And that's one of the many reasons, but in my opinion, the biggest reason why the state of Illinois has $130-odd billion of unfunded liability. So the question is, once the plans are consolidated, is the consolidated plan going to continue to provide that minimum? Which, for you guys, I would hope would say, well, we don't want to fund that way because we want to reduce our liability rather than continue to let it expand. If that is the only option that's provided by the consolidated pension fund, the statute still says that you can have your own actuarial valuation completed for, and fund based on that amount. You would contribute if the consolidated fund says that you could pay $800,000, but a contribution based on more financially reasonable methods says it should be $1 million. You could put in $1 million rather than the $800,000 and reduce your unfunded liability. The accounts are separate, so it's not going into a general pool. You have your own pool, so you're not contributing extra and going to pay off, someone else's unfunded liability. So that's my big fear with this is the consolidated fund uses that approach of just giving the statutory minimum, and then it becomes the standard funding approach for cities that are not currently using that approach, like you. And if that were if it were to become the standard, any benefit from consolidating the assets would be dwarfed by the lack of funding, and the funded ratios would continue to go the wrong direction. So I kind of rambled there for a little bit, but I don't know if that answered your initial
I think
question.
that answers my question. So even though this is being consolidated, the money that the city of Geneva contributes is in its own bucket, and that is used to pay our portion of pension liability for the same things that we have right now. We are not going to wind up being told what our assumption is going to be and having to pay for somebody else who may not be in the same position that the city of Geneva's in.
That's correct. Your money is going to your unfunded liability, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone remotely, any questions or comments before I invite Alderman Burkhart? Alderman Burkhart.
Yeah, I just was gonna say thank you. That was perfect. That was my question, was about the unfunded liability. How would the consolidated plan, how would it keep a city that's tried to be responsible from having to cover?
You and a lot of other people have had that question.
Yeah, but that made sense. Perhaps is this, well, we'll see. Maybe this is a step one way and then eventually you go to the IMRF model perhaps.
Yeah, as the mayor suggested, I think, and obviously I was not involved in those discussions, but I think it was given, there was a lot of give and take involved to get the necessary votes that were needed. So, there was some concessions on both sides to get that through.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was very well.
Mr. Franken, there's not a sunset clause on this legislation, is there, for review?
No,
But the timeline is such that it requires review of the actuarial numbers, correct?
Well, yes, so the consolidated fund doesn't start providing any sort of information until after the transition period ends, and that's as of June 30th, 2022. And then, you may be alluding, in terms of the assumptions that are being used by the consolidated fund, first of all, it takes a supermajority to pass any assumption changes, which, could give me heartburn as an actuary, if choosing the actuarial assumptions becomes, politicized. And once assumption changes are agreed upon, they all have to be phased in over a 3-year period. So if you change from 7.25 down to 6.5, you wouldn't see a huge hit that first year. It would be three years worth of steps to get to your ultimate endpoint.
Okay. For what it's worth, and I'm certain you're well aware of this, during this debate over consolidation, one of the loudest voices in opposition to consolidation were, in fact, investment professionals, because they each had their own cadre of communities they were investing for, and I believe actuarial firms to some extent. Is that correct, Mr. Franken? Or?
I'm not aware of actuarial firms really, raising issues about it. The police officers, frankly, were opposed to it. Most of the police officers were opposed to it. The firefighters union, supported it from the beginning. And I think some of the concessions at the end were to get the police unions to go forward with it.
Interesting stuff.
Yes.
Anyone else? Questions or comments for our guest? No action needed tonight. We appreciate the presentation.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Nice seeing you.
Item 5, folks, amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments this evening on the council agenda? If not, item 6 is the omnibus agenda. All items marked with an asterisk are considered to be routine by this council and can be considered and voted upon with one motion. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Marks, seconded by Swanson. Questions or comments? Mr. Recording Secretary, please take the roll call.
Alderman Burkhart.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby. Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilberg.
Kilberg, aye.
Alderman Kosrog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman Marks.
Aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
The omnibus agenda passes with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 absent. We skip to item 11, municipal bills for payment. We kindly ask our recording secretary to please read the bills in their aggregate for our consideration. Are you ready for that, Mr. McCready?
Yes. Municipal bills for payment totaling $2,262,101.25 as recommended by the city administrator.
Mayor, this is Bruno, so moves that we approve and pay the bills as read. The individual items that add up to that amount can be found in tonight's city council packet on the city website.
Alderman Bruno makes the speech he makes every other Monday. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Alderman Kasserag. Questions or comments regarding the bills?
I thought that speech was my responsibility.
It was good. I'm glad to see the plastic is down in the room. Whenever you're ready, sir, roll call.
All right. Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilberg.
Aye.
Alderman Kasserag.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman Marks.
Aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burgart.
Aye.
Motion passes.
The municipal bills for payment were passed with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 absent. We jump to Committee of the Whole items of business. Item 12A is to approve ordinance number 2020-31, amending Title 7, Vehicles and Traffic, Chapter 4, Traffic Schedules, Schedule 5, Speed Limits.
I think that's part of the omnibus.
Oh, I'm sorry, it is. Forgive me. 13. Good God, thank you. See the ink bleeding through?
Yes, I see it.
Holy, do not sit next to Tara. That's what it said right there. Item 13A, forgive me, folks. Consider approval of resolution number 2020-75, upholding.
Mayor, I would like to interject here. I have a personal relationship with people on both sides of this issue. I'm going to be recusing myself from this discussion.
Alderman Bruno will be recusing himself, and in consultation with the city attorney prior to the meeting, Alderman Bruno will be disengaging his Zoom connection with us in the spirit of full recusal. Again, folks, item 13A is to consider approval of resolution number 2020-75, upholding the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission to deny variation requests for 427 Fulton Street to allow a detached garage in the corner street yard and to reduce the required corner street yard setback from 20 feet to 1.5 feet. Is there a motion? So moved. There's a motion by Alderman Marks. Is there a second? Second. Second by Alderman Kasserag. Any preamble, Mr. McCready?
Say the item before you concerns the recommended denial by the city's Planning and Zoning Commission for a variation which would allow the applicant to replace an existing one-car detached garage with a two-car detached garage at 427 Fulton Street. The applicant had requested 2 variances, one to allow the detached garage in the corner street yard and one to reduce the setback from 20 to 1.5 feet. Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended denial of the request at their September 24th, 2020 meeting. And this evening, Director Regroot is here to comment further if there are questions on this.
Any comments or questions other than what we know for Director DeGroot? A reminder, an affirmative vote is to stay or uphold the Planning and Zoning Commission's ruling. Alderman Caven?
I have a question first. I don't know, in going through here, I mean, I obviously see, I didn't have anybody reach out to me. I don't see anybody in the stands to speak on this today. Just out of curiosity, obviously that's a large change from 20 feet to a foot and a half. Do you think that there's somewhere in between there that they may be able to still get something done even if this is approved? Or I mean, the denial is approved. Is there still an opportunity for them to do something in that area?
Yes, sir, I believe so. I think that was the consensus of the Planning and Zoning Commission as well, and their guidance to the applicant was maybe to revise their submittal. They might be willing to grant other variations, but the ones that were requested they thought were too severe to accomplish the goal. And the applicant actually indicated to me in an email earlier this evening that he would plan to go forward with another request.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anyone else? Alderman Kosarog?
I had one question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
There was, I watched the meeting this morning, and you had said that there was a valuation to that red oak tree that was, should this move forward, was slated for removal from the parkway. I was just curious what that was,
That valuation,
approximately.
it was over $18,000. 18,900 and some change.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
I believe the motion was Marks and seconded by Swanson, yes. Any other questions or comments for the director? Again, an affirmative vote is to stay the ruling of the Planning and Zoning Commission. A nay vote is to recommend overturning that ruling. Whenever you're ready, Mr. McCready, please take the roll call.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilberg.
Aye.
Alderman Kosarog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman Marks.
Aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Burghardt.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Motion passes 9-0, 1 abstention.
9 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 1 recusal. The motion does pass. The decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission is upheld. Item, and I did text Alderman Bruno that he can join us.
He's back.
There he is, okay. Item 13B, consider approval of resolution number 2020-76, authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the County of Kane for CARES Act funding. Is there a motion? Motion by Alderman Marks. Second. Seconded by Alderman Kosarog. Mr. McCready, you ready for this?
You betcha.
You betcha.
May I take it away?
Yes, sir.
On March 27th, 2020, the President signed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, otherwise known as the CARES Act. The act provided the County of Kane $92,900,000 of funds to distribute to local governments, nonprofits, and King County departments to assist in the mitigation of COVID-19 expenses. Staff has submitted the city's application to King County for public safety payroll expenses from May 8th through August 22nd, 2020. Once the expenditures are approved, King County will require an intergovernmental agreement be executed by the city prior to the distribution of such funds. The total amount of the funds that may be reimbursed to the city shall not exceed $1,280,590 based on the county's allocation formula. As the deadline between the time of the receipt of the IGA and the deadline to submit may be short, staff is requesting approval for the city administrator to execute the IGA subject to review by the city attorney once received from Kane County. And then joining us here tonight is Director Cruz, who can also speak to that.
Questions or comments for Director Cruz, Mr. McCready, or myself regarding this matter?
Municipalities receive roughly 40% of the 92 million. What was the figure?
I think the total came to about 36 plus million, somewhere around there, yeah.
What was it?
45%? Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And as you may know, they're still accepting applications for direct business support and non-for-profit support.
That time is short though, right?
Very short.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure is. Hearing no additional questions, seeing no additional hands raised, whenever you're ready, Mr. McCready, please take the roll call.
Alderman Kilberg.
Aye.
Alderman Kosarog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman Marks.
Aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burghardt.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Item 13B passes with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 absent. We're at the adjournment portion of tonight's council meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by McGowan. Roll call vote, please, Mr. McCready.
Alderman Kosarog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman Marks.
Aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burghardt.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilberg.
Aye.
We'll just take a moment. Mr. Marks will be chairing the committee of the whole meeting. I'll turn the microphones off while we transition.
All right, I'll call the committee of the whole meeting for Monday, October 5th, 2020 to order. My name is Alderman Rich Marks, along with Alderman Kasserag. We are the aldermen of the Second Ward. Let it be known that all the aldermen are present and the mayor. First order of business is there any new business or public comment? Alderman Burkhart.
Did, thank you, Chair. This is just a kind of a reminder. I think about a month ago, the council in discussions did talk about wanting to see our copies of our legal invoices. And so I just wanted to bring that up again, that's something I'm hoping we can see soon so we can take a closer look at those. So, thank you.
Alderman Swanson.
Thank you. I did have the opportunity to go in early last meeting and review, so I believe that invitation is open to any alderman who wished to do so. I contacted Stephanie and said that I wanted to do so and was allowed to do so.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Alderman Kilburg.
As a follow-up from our meeting on the 14th, I would suggest we have our retreat coming up on, I believe, November 5th.
I believe that's correct.
It's the 6th, I believe.
First Friday in November. Yeah.
I would suggest that a portion of that meeting be dedicated.
Microphone?
Oh, thank you.
I'd suggest that a portion of that meeting be dedicated to parliamentary procedure training.
I think Mr. McCready will take note of that and
Duly noted.
follow it up. Any other new business or public comment? All right.
I just wanted to say I
Yes, go
back that up. You know, I would think that would be helpful along with our cheat sheet here, but some real-time training could be valuable. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item agenda number 3, recommend suspending the rules to permit Alderman Marks to be the committee of the whole chair for the majority of the meeting and to vote on all action items on the agenda. This requires a 2/3 majority vote. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Kasserag, seconded by Alderman Berghardt. Any comments or questions?
I will
Go
call
ahead
the
with the
roll.
roll call, please.
All right.
Mr. McCready.
Let's see where we left off. Okay. Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burgart.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilburg.
Aye.
Alderman Kasserag.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is approve the special committee of the whole minutes from September 14th, 2020, and the regular committee of the whole minutes from September 21st, 2020. Is there a motion? Motion by Alderman McGowan. Do I have a second? Alderman Berghardt is the second. Any comments, questions? Mr. McCready, it is
Gotcha.
to you for a roll call.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burgart.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilburg.
Aye.
Alderman Kasserag.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
I will vote on. Item number 5A, items of business, is to consider the draft resolution suspending special events review and approval until Phase 4 gathering restrictions are modified or the region enters Phase 5. I know you have a little
Yes.
preamble to this, if
Yes,
you may, and then we'll,
Thank
I guess
you.
I can need a motion first. Do I have a motion?
So, second.
Alderman Swanson makes the motion, Alderman Berghardt makes the second.
One moment.
That's fine.
All right. In accordance with Restore Illinois Phase 4 gathering restrictions, the City Council approved a resolution in July suspending the review and approval for special events through October 1st, 2020, Action to extend this time frame is needed as our region remains in Phase 4. A draft resolution suspending special event review and approval until Phase 4 gathering restrictions are amended or the region enters Phase 5 is presented this evening. This item permits the city administrator to amend or lift the restrictions as appropriate, and the suspension applies to those events which take place on city-owned public property. Joining us this evening is Director Timoshenko, who can also speak to this item.
Do we have any questions? Comments? Anything from, no? Seeing none, hearing none, let's go for the roll call, Mr. McCready.
All right. Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burgart.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilberg.
Aye.
Alderman Kosarog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
There we go.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Next item of business is 5B. Consider approval of certificate of completion for River Lane and Fulton Street improvements. I think you have a little.
Bruno, so moves.
Oh, thank you, Alderman Bruno, and a second by Alderman Swanson. Whenever you're ready.
Item before you concerns accepting a certificate of completion for public right-of-way improvements to accommodate construction of 3 residential lots at the corner of River Lane and Fulton. Staff recommends acceptance of the certificate, and joining us this evening is we have City Engineer, Mr. Brian Schreiber, and Director of Public Works, Mr. Richard Babica, here to comment.
Do we have any questions or comments for either one? Brian, you're going to get off easy tonight. Hearing none, seeing none, let's go for the roll call vote then, Mr. McCready.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burgart.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilberg.
Aye.
Alderman Kosarog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is item 5C. Consider draft resolution authorizing execution of a contract with WBK Engineering in an amount not to exceed $39,840.90 for the 2020 Citywide Culvert Bridge Inventory Study and Maintenance Plan Project. Do I have a motion? Motion by Alderman Burghardt, second by Alderman Caven. Whenever you're ready, Mr. McCready, we can have our little preamble.
All right. Earlier this year, staff conducted a RFP process to evaluate the various structural consultants interested in conducting a citywide culvert/bridge inventory study and maintenance plan. This study will evaluate the city's numerous culverts and bridges for structural integrity, prepare a list of recommended repairs, and an estimated cost of resolving those repairs, prioritize the repairs, and develop a recommended capital improvement program. This information will be utilized in future budget planning. Based on the materials that were presented in interviews, staff determined that WBK Engineering would provide the best culvert bridge study. Staff recommends authorizing the contract with WBK Engineering with the inclusion of a 10% contingency in the overall amount not to exceed for any unforeseen changes. Any changes would require approval by the city administrator. And again, joining us this evening are Director Babica and City Engineer Mr. Brian Schreiber to answer any questions you may have regarding this item.
Any questions? Alderman Kilberg.
We've got 20 structures that need to be reviewed in the city.
20 that we know of.
20 that you're aware of.
This process is for them
Is there any history? When was the last time that we'd conducted such a study? Do you know?
none to my knowledge.
So, there, probably never.
That's probably a good bet.
Okay, just, then we probably need to. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, seeing none, Mr. McCready.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burgart.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilberg.
Aye.
Alderman Kosarog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is item 5D. Consider draft resolution authorizing waiver of bidding process and execution of a contract with Hack in an amount not to exceed $20,703.75 for service partnership agreement for analyzed probe services at the water and wastewater treatment plants. Do I have a motion? Motion by Alderman Gowan. I need a second. Alderman Kossarog is a second. Whenever you're ready.
Take it away.
With our preamble.
Staff at the water treatment and wastewater treatment facilities rely on hack analyzers and probes to monitor processes in these plants. These probes communicate directly with the SCADA systems to control pumps, blowers, and other equipment at the plants. With the recent improvements at the wastewater plant that added probes to the treatment process, a maintenance service agreement is recommended. Staff has negotiated an annual service agreement for both treatment facilities for your consideration this evening. And then joining us again, Rich Babica, Director of Public Works. For any questions on this item?
Any questions? Maybe I'll just ask one. Rich, what's the status of that construction project out there? Do we know? Have a clue? Just to give us a little update while we're talking about this.
The construction at the wastewater treatment plant is substantially complete.
Okay.
And we are wrapping up through the final phases now of the punch list and warranty phase.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That's good news. And it pretty much was finished on time, wasn't it?
It was finished on time. Yeah.
No, it was. I thought it was. I just wanted to make sure of that. But whenever you're ready, Mr. McCready, we will take the vote.
Alderman Burgart.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilberg.
Aye.
Alderman Kossarog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Next item on the agenda, the item passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is item 5E, consider draft resolution endorsing and authorizing city administrator to execute an ITEP grant application for Couts Road improvements. Do I have a motion?
Bruno so moves.
Bruno makes the motion, second by Alderman Kilberg. Whenever you're ready. Mr. McCready.
One moment.
Yep.
Okay, the City of Geneva and City of St. Charles, in conjunction with the DuPage Airport Authority, are pursuing a construction project for Couts Road north of Illinois Route 38. Staff is recommending approval of a resolution authorizing the city administrator to pursue an Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program, otherwise known as ITEP, grant that will assist in paying for certain streetscape improvements such as bike paths, pedestrian facilities, and landscape improvements. As part of this application process, the local agency is required to pass a resolution endorsing the project and authorizing staff to apply for the funding. And again, we have staff here from the city's engineering and public works departments to answer any questions you may have regarding this.
Do we have any questions? Comments? Hearing none, seeing none. Whenever you're ready, Mr. McCurdy.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilberg.
Aye.
Alderman Kossarog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burgart.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Next item of business is 5F, consider draft resolution authorizing execution of an engineering services agreement in an amount not to exceed $446,048 with Trans Systems Engineering for Couts Road Phase 2 design services. Do I have a motion? Motion by Alderman Kossarog. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Burghardt.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Kearney.
At the October 24th, 2019 City Council meeting, the city entered into an engineering services agreement with Trans Systems for Phase 1 design of Couts Road between Illinois Route 38 and Illinois Route 64, which will be completed in 2020. The next stage, Phase 2 in design, is where the design documents, specifications, estimates, utility coordination, permits, coordination with state and federal agencies, and project management is completed. The City of Geneva and St. Charles staff involved with this project are confident in the ability of their ability to complete Phase 2 of this design. This process will straddle the FY21 and FY22 budget years, with $200,000 of those expenses anticipated in FY21. Staff has reviewed this and believes that that amount be accommodated within the existing infrastructure capital project fund. Staff recommends approval of a resolution authorizing the city administrator to execute an engineering services agreement for Phase 2 design services with Trans Systems Engineering in an amount of $405,498, including a 10% contingency subject to the city administrator's approval. And then again, joining us this evening is staff from the city's engineering division and public works department to answer any questions regarding this project.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, seeing none, let's go for the roll call vote.
All right. Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilberg. Alderman Kosarog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burgart.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Here we go. Here we got everyone.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Next item of business is item 5G. Consider draft resolution authorizing a repayment plan for past due utility balances and resumption of disconnect late payment penalties effective November 22nd, 2020. Do you have anything?
Bruno, so moves.
Oh, thank you, Alderman Bruno.
Second.
Second by Alderman Caven.
And I will,
We're turning it over
I believe you
to,
do have a presentation,
We
so
have
I'm
a
going to invite Director
presentation,
Cruz
so Miss-
up to begin her presentation.
I feel like I'm the ninth batter, like the last of the, last of everyone. that-
all we want is a home run.
I'm gonna try. I'm trying my hardest. Especially trying to figure out this PowerPoint thing. So
Do you want, you want to go through your PowerPoint first and then
Yeah, so I'll go through
questions?
PowerPoint first, then you can ask questions. Everyone on screen's gonna go away.
Okay.
This is what Pete taught me to do. Screen. Okay. He said choose this one. Okay, no, that did not work.
He's coming to help you.
Just start it from the beginning. Okay, so choose the right side, okay. Good evening. I'm here tonight to update the discussion we had 1 month ago in regards to COVID and the utilities. At that meeting, I was requested to come back to give some updates, projections. I also now have another month of data that we can go over to talk about where the receivables are at this point in time. So I'm just gonna get right into it. First, I would like to talk about the electric cash and receivables by month in millions. So as you can see, this is the graph we have, which you did see 1 month ago. We've added on September, September, we didn't have that. So now we see that from August to September, cash did go down, and also receivables went up. This is for the electric fund. October, I did estimate that the receivables will increase due to the overall receivables going up within both funds. November, you see a cash decrease because we have bond payments that are due for that fund, so cash is gonna go down, everything being equal. And then December, you do see a decrease in the receivables, an increase in cash, because as was suggested 1 month ago, we would start charging penalties in December. So I believe people will start paying if they've fallen behind or make an attempt to start catching up on their bills. So next, I wanted to compare the receivables from last year to this year to see how it's shaking out so far. So you look from February until September, we have actuals. So you can see there is definitely a trend line for 2020. 19 is not really trending at all. I really looked through the details and I can't figure out why it's so all over the place. Part of the reason is obviously summer is gonna be higher receivables because of the fact that it's higher utility bills. It's higher electric, it's higher water. You'd see it go up, but typically you start seeing a fall in the fall. So for October, what I estimated is I looked at what I see currently in the receivables, how much it's gone up already. The arrears have gone up 14% from the end of August when I spoke to you last until the end of September. So that's the increase in arrears we've seen so far in 1 month. So I looked at that and trended it out a little bit. You see the receivables falling in October, and that is because there was a large payment that was made. So I do think that payment's gonna keep going, and then we should be moving up a little bit. I also see December going down once again, because the fact that we will be starting to charge penalties as of November. So on the water side, the graph looks fairly similar. Obviously, cash is a little bit different on the water side. The difference is December, you do see a large decrease that I've projected, and that is also because their bond payments are in December instead of November. So you will see a large decrease there. I've also increased the receivables a little bit as what the current trend is, and then I did decrease it again because of the discussion of starting to charge penalties in December or November 22nd. I'll explain that at the end within the fund. And next, I wanted to compare it again from last year, this year, so you can kind of get an idea. You can see still there's little waves, but definitely, we can see this year, it has significantly gone up. Now, mind you, too, you also have to take into account, which is really difficult to do, is it was far drier this year than last year, so your receivables would be higher in the first place because we are using far more water. If you looked at my financials that were issued this month, for July, there was 25% increase in water usage for 1 month compared to the prior year. So we do definitely see an increase, and that is the reason why. It was very, very dry. Last year, I think it was I know it was a very wet spring. I think it kind of held over a little bit longer. So you do see an increase in receivables also just in general because we have, it is far, 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 far wetter or far drier and also far warmer. So then I wanted to look at the utility arrears balance by month. So you saw the numbers before August of August ended at 334,000, and there was a discussion that at 50% increase of that, we'd come back and talk about it, where we were at. So I don't think we'll make it there. I think by December we would get close. This assumes a 14% increase that we had from September to October, and then through October to November, and then once I believe we start charging penalties, that the receivables will start going down because people that are choosing not to pay but can pay, I believe will start paying because they do not want to pay that penalty. So I believe they will start going down. And I did include a 15% increase up until December, then I included a 5% decrease going down in December. So to look at a snapshot of the top 20 we saw from last month compared to this month. So last month, the top delinquent balance was $105,774. That balance for that account is actually still the top, but it's down to $17,984. That is delinquent balance, not the balance in total. So they did make some very large payment to bring that down. The number of commercials and residentials are still the same dollars, but they actually are different accounts. They are not the same. As you can see, the number of rentals has switched because the makeup of those top 12 have changed. Number of accounts with one payment, that's gone down from 90 to 80%, which would include two accounts that did make payments within the past month. So a summary of the ordinance that we talked about 1 month ago, and which is presented in your packet tonight, is that we would offer a 12-month payment plan with 1/12 of the balance as of November 22nd, with the first payment due January 1st. Now, I know there was discussion about we were starting December 1st. The reason why we cannot start on December 1st is the last cycle in utility billing that was penalized was the cycle that was on the 15th. So to be equitable to every single cycle, we have to start penalizing on cycle 2, which is on the 22nd. So it'd have to be November 22nd or December 22nd. It cannot be anything in between to be equitable to everyone, to all the ratepayers. With the first payment being due January 1st, 2021. I did add the time in there because it's the holiday season. Staff take time off and just less work days in general. So I need a little bit more time to get all the delinquent notices out and to get all the processing done. The completion online form will still be the same. Online, fill it out, send it in, we will start the process. You must stay current with your utility bills after November 22nd. Beginning with those November 22nd bills, which would be due mid-December, we would be assessing penalties. And then the disconnection date, or disconnections would resume after April 30th, 2021. And since we talked last month, the ICC about a week ago came out and said that they've suggested to all their for-profit entities that they do not start their disconnection notices until April 1st of 2021. So we are in line with the ICC. Mind you, we do not legally need to follow the ICC, but typically we do follow their guidance. So that is a summary of what we talked about 1 month ago in an ordinance with some updated information, which is what was requested back then. So is there any other additional questions you have?
Well, Alderman Swanson, but then can you get the, I can't
how
see
do
if the
I-
people
hold on.
calling in
Pete?
have questions, so.
I don't know. How do I get people back?
Okay. Pete, we're gonna need some help.
Right, are they back? I think I did it.
No,
Escape.
on escape, okay.
I see them, but I don't know how. I escaped.
Sorry, I just want to get
That's okay.
everybody
Yeah.
involved
No, I get
before
it.
we go that route.
There you go. Screen off.
There they are.
Okay.
Sorry.
Alderman Swanson.
Thank you,
have
Chairman.
some quick- Thank you.
I just wanted to, some of the numbers you presented, it appears that we had some deterioration in dollars. The total dollar amount in arrears went from 330 to 334 to 386. However, in thousands. However, the number of accounts stayed relatively the same. So that tells me it's the same accounts. That we have not seen a deterioration in the number of accounts. It's the same accounts that continue to roll up an additional.
Between the last 2 months, yes, it's around the same accounts.
Okay, and I'm guessing your assumptions when you had the estimated months where those same accounts were going to behave the
Yes.
same way.
I am making the assumption that the accounts that are currently not paying will continue not paying.
Okay, so we really have a total number of accounts that we're addressing this to is about 25 accounts roughly.
Well, that's only, well, in total, in arrears, there's about 650,
Okay,
so.
but
I
the
just
chart that you
focused on the top
showed,
20.
okay, but that was the vast majority of the dollars, it was my recollection, so.
Yes, but I did not do the calculation now to see what percentage of the top 20 are now percentage of the total. Because that high dollar value is now dropped off, it is probably smaller.
Okay, so that was a $80,000 payment then, it appeared, or
Approximately.
somewhere in that amount.
Yeah.
So that was a good news story. So this could impact then upwards of 600 accounts, but for all practical purposes, it's going to be a very limited number of accounts that are going to take advantage of this program.
Yeah, because we do bill approximately 10,700 accounts on a monthly basis, so you are looking approximately.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone calling in have any questions? If not, Alderman Burkhart.
So can you talk us through this again? If I'm one of those 660 accounts and I'm overdue at some portion, you're gonna take what I'm overdue, divide it by 12.
Yes.
And say, starting January 1st, you can make these payments, and you just, by the end of the 2021 year, you'd be paid off. Now, if I decide that I wanna double up and pay double, or I just wanna get it off, I get my tax return next year or something in March or April, I just pay the rest, that's fine too.
Yes, and there will not be any penalties charged to that. So all the penalties will be charged to anything past November 22nd.
Okay. And how are we gonna let people know about this again? And
So we are going to send out a notice to both the landlord and the account holder to let them know of where they are in arrears. It's going to be a letter that's going to explain the process of how you're going to be able to go online, submit the form for the payment plan, and how the process will work.
if we have any customers who aren't tech savvy, or, perhaps some of our older residents, will we be able to help them with
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
we would be able to print the form physically in the office. They can come in during our office hours
Yeah, okay,
and sign.
very good, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Alderman Kasserag.
Just had one more thought to try to be sensitive to people's financial needs. Could we have a small grace period after the November deadline where people say, oh, shoot, I meant to do it and I didn't do it? Give them another 5 days, or frankly, even just modify the date, but so that it kind of pushes them towards that and then they're not. Or would you guys kind of be nice about it anyway if they came in after that?
Yeah, as long as they make it before the first deadline. Because the thing is, once that billing of November 22nd goes out, that's where it gets far more complicated for staff to do the work, to move the money, and to move the process over into a different side of our financial software. So that's why we were looking for that cutoff, and it gave everyone now plenty of time, considering we're looking at this now, it'll be passed on the 19th, if approved. You know, that would actually give them almost a whole month to review the letter, contact us, and get everything started.
So I guess I'm just proposing maybe modifying that date a little bit earlier and then giving like a 7-day grace period, just knowing human behavior, rather than a hard date. Sorry, you didn't do it. There's nothing we can do. Our billing's done. Just a small suggestion, knowing how people.
We're always willing to work with the customers if they do call us.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Kilberg.
I was looking through the resolution, and I don't see a reference in there to the fact that it's subject to change.
No, we did not put that in there. So, I guess the question, so do you want to keep the 50%?
I just think
No
that
max to come back to council before
that was
November 22nd?
that was our discussion, that at some point in time, it could be reviewed if the delinquencies really fell out of bed. And is there a need for that to be included? Obviously, we can take action, but you know, if we got to January 1st and all of a sudden we needed to do something, we're tied into this through April 30th.
Well, from my understanding, the 50% that we would go back and discuss this was in regards to the penalties. I don't believe it was in regards to the payment plan. I thought that was agreed upon, and I could be wrong. I did go back and try to listen, and there was a lot of discussion, so.
No,
I
my impression was that we could restructure it if in fact it became burdensome, a financial burden to the city. Obviously, it's already a financial burden.
Right.
Maybe I didn't make that clear.
Up until what point were you looking to?
Well, I think it was,
Or just constant review?
I threw out hypothetically that 50%,
Correct.
and I don't see it accommodated in the resolution. I don't know, did I miss it? Or
No,
there's no
did
reference
not.
to it?
Alderman Burkhart.
I guess I'm confused and need a refresher, but like, I guess if we offer this payment plan to people, I feel like once we offer this payment plan and they sign up for it, are you thinking we'd be able to go back to them and say, well, actually, it's April 5th and things look bad, we need it now, or are you thinking more I'm kind of forgetting the whole 50% thing, honestly. Was that when we were talking about pushing it off farther, or?
No, I think, what actions do we take if in fact it becomes more of a burden to the city, or more problematic than we anticipate? And obviously, people that would take advantage of the plan, obviously they would be locked in.
Gotcha.
But as we look forward, what's our remedy?
In regards to?
Right. In other words, if it becomes more burdensome.
Well, if people don't take the plan, then they're gonna start paying their late fees as it is, right?
And then they wouldn't have the extension. So what would happen is if you chose not to do the plan, and you'd start November 22nd, you would receive a penalty on that bill only. It does not retroactively go back to all the unpaid bills from the past months. But you'd start being penalized every cycle. And then once we would get to possibly doing disconnections, you would then be disconnected for the full amount,
Okay.
which would be the pre-November and possibly the current if you're not paying that as well. Because our goal was to take that time frame and to separate it from the current process, to basically allow to allow the utility customers to start from scratch. Say November 22nd is your start from scratch point, penalized from this forward, And then if you want to work, if you need to work with us on everything from behind, we can do that.
So we're not going to offer this to anyone that would come to us, let's say in January, and then prorate it over 6 months? Okay. Okay, that's clear then. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? What happens if someone who's on this plan doesn't stay current? Is there a penalty for that?
The penalty would be that if they have not stayed current, when disconnections begin in May, we would be allowed to disconnect for the non-payment for the prior
And then
payments.
everything would be due at that point?
Everything would be due, including the utility bills as well at that point in time.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure of that, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. Mr. McCready. Thank you, appreciate it. We're ready for roll call.
Alderman Kilberg.
Aye.
Sorry, Alderman Kilberg. Aye. Alderman Kosrog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman Marks.
Aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burgart.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is number 6, adjournment. Do I have a motion?
Before we adjourn, just to
That's fine.
confirm earlier, am I correct in that you voted
Aye in everything,
affirmative
yes.
in the
Yes,
items where I
yes,
neglected
that is
to?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have a motion? Yeah,
May I
go
share one item, final comment here from the staff's corner before we
Go
adjourn
ahead.
officially tonight? I was just going to remind City Council that on October 12th is the annual joint meeting with SPAC. We are planning to host that meeting here in City Council chambers. Obviously, looking at the numbers and thinking about COVID-19 out of abundance of caution, we have asked SPAC for several volunteers, looking to see who would be willing to participate remotely, as we have some individuals tonight. In the week ahead, I'll be sending out an email just requesting the same as City Council. Again, as you might recall from past instances, we do try and space you out, seat you one at a time. It's truly a blended joint meeting, but we are limited in how many people we can accommodate here in our traditional, if I don't break the microphone, in our traditional U-shaped or square-shaped table. So
Okay,
please keep that in mind.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Just, all right, motion to adjourn? Alderman Swanson, you can take the roll call when you're ready.
All right, adjournment. That was Swanson, I heard?
Yes?
Okay. Alderman Kosrog.
Aye.
Alderman Maladra.
Maladra, aye.
Alderman Marks.
Aye.
Alderman McGowan.
Aye.
Alderman Swanson.
Aye.
Alderman Bruno.
Bruno, aye.
Alderman Burgart.
Aye.
Alderman Ruby.
Ruby, aye.
Alderman Caven.
Aye.
Alderman Kilberg.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.